Now, I will go slightly faster now because you are slightly more informed about Saint Therese. Now, I did mention the act of oblation in 1895, June. I did mention retreat, the annual retreat she made in September 96. I will come back now a little bit between the two dates. There are plenty of other things happening. I just took some major moments in her life, but there are plenty of things happening. I mean, Therese is an ocean, not an ocean, an ocean, like a river, a sea, and then an ocean. She's not an ocean, she's an ocean. Now, in April 96, so of course 1896, Therese, which is, as you see, almost a year after the act of oblation. April 96, the early days of Easter, Therese is introduced, is starting to have an experience of something she never had before. This experience later on will have a name coined today, not by her, I insist, even though maybe the word is used, but which is the trial of faith. She uses the word trial, épreuve in French. She uses the word faith as well, hence the reason why we chose that. But initially it wasn't even coined this way. When you read the early versions of what I'm about to read, the trial of faith, they put in 1998 the first edition of the Story of a Soul, published in October, November 1898, a year after her death. She dies September 97. September 97. She dies end of September. A year after, A Story of the Soul is published. Why is it published? Normally, Carmelites are not supposed to write and publish, in general. You might have the odd one, but in general, this is not their mission. The reason is the following. Usually, when any nun, any Carmelite cloistered nun dies, the monasteries of a country would send a letter of few pages, like an obituary, that describes a little bit the nun, how she lived, who she is, where she's born, what happened, etc. And then she entered. So like 3-4 pages on the person. So the other nuns will know, but it's too late now. She's in heaven, okay? Now, if the nun has something relevant to be mentioned, something she wrote, a letter she wrote, or something that the community has and wants to share, then the letter becomes a bit bigger. And in the case of Therese, since they had manuscript A, B, and C available, and they felt, and Therese gave hints before dying, that what she's writing, what she's saying, she knew that things will happen after. No? She had an intuition, a feeling that things will happen after her death. So they used these manuscripts, and instead of sending a letter of 3-4 pages, they sent a big book. But it took them a year to find, to prepare edition. It takes time, no? To arrange the book, to check the copies, etc., find the publisher, funding. Funding came from the family, etc. Since this is why the Story of the Soul, we have the Story of the Soul. It comes because it's a converted, a letter converted into a book that normally is sent to the Carmelite nuns, and it was sent to few more people, and that's it. I hope I'm not wrong, the first publication in 1998, yes, was around 2,000 copies, if I'm not wrong. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's, which is still a lot when you think about it. Finished in less than few months. Sold out less than few months. Not sold, given probably, but less than a few months. So they had to republish it. And they were caught by the success of that book. The way that Therese was fishing people, one of the greatest and strongest means to fish people, you know, you go fishing, no? I send you to be like fishermen, says Jesus, no? So now she's a fisherwoman, no? Not a fisherman. So the way she fished people initially was through her book. So people would open the book, read A, B, and C, and discover her. And you can read online all the reactions. We have the website of the Carmel, the office, the special office dedicated to that, and we have all her works in English, by the way, online. So whenever you want to access any information, you have, of course, plenty of things in French, everything, not only her works, but plenty of other things. And you have as well in English, and probably they are working to other languages. So this is how we discovered Therese. Of course, she has plenty of miracles. There are 7 big volumes published toward almost after the end of First World War. She was very present in First World War. Father Marie-Eugène experienced her presence. My granddad experienced her presence. We had at home a big frame of Saint Therese because of him, because of the First World War. How Therese was present in the combats and comforting the soldiers. Now, so many miracles from Therese plus her book. This is how Therese had. In French we say un ouragan de gloire, a hurricane of glory. It's like so powerful, a stormy glory just after her death. Her beatification and canonization 1925 is very early when you think about it at that time. Today we can canonize quickly, we did it for a few saints, but in general, it takes years to canonize somebody, and it was done very quickly with Therese. 500,000 people at St. Peter's for the canonization, which at that time 500,000 was a lot. Today we have more. We had more for certain saints. Okay. Now, in her book, that these two, amongst many others, read, you have the account of something that is very difficult to classify. A trial, let us call it a trial, épreuve, trial, that science, theological science, find it very difficult to explain, till today. And there are other trials, but one of the most known trials is Saint Therese trial. We had all sorts of explanation given, and this is the subject of my PhD. What explanation can we give to that type of trial, especially if it is seen from the... Do you mind please just closing the door? Thank you very much. Thank you. So, seen from the theological perspective, seen from a masters of spiritual life, and we have here two of the greatest masters of last century. One very known, of course, and the other one is almost unknown, but I still consider him as a great master. Forgive me if you do not agree, but hopefully you will agree one day. I will contribute into convincing you. Now, what I'm saying, the trial has has no direct explanation in the science of theology, because this, I will read it, but I'm introducing it. In the science that we have even till now, the journey of growth in spiritual life, if you accept it, because today there are people who don't even accept what I'm about to say. Well, they live with it, no? With not accepting it. I am parting the journey in 3 different sections, but they are not equal in time. They can vary. Each human being is unique. Some moments of this is purification, this is illumination, and this is union. And after union, you die. You go to see God directly because you are already united to God. It's like almost nothing is added. This is what Therese says, no? To possess Him, I possess Him already. I don't know what I will have more in heaven. I'm quoting her. She's a genius. You are with a person who is completely of another league. Possessing Him, I'm translating from French. Possessing Him, I possess Him. I don't know what I will have more in heaven. And if I'm not surprised, I will play surprised. You're not dealing with any person here. Despite the fact that she's 24 years old, but she's a giant. She's a giant. Possessing Him, I possess Him. And she's talking, we are a few months before she dies. So, theology gives us this classic categorization of the journey. You have a period of purification, and within purification you have, of course, different levels and layers of purification, as I mentioned, no? You have the senses, then you have the emotions. I did mention the emotions for Therese. Then you have the core, the deepest part of the human being, the nucleus of the human being. Then it's finished. So we are roughly at 93 here. So this will correspond to that, no? Then you have a period of illumination. And illumination, explained by John of the Cross, is an abundant visits of the Holy Spirit. So graces and after graces upon graces upon graces are received here to prepare the future bride for the spiritual marriage. And the spiritual marriage will be just here, spiritual marriage. So then you have union. And in union you will have, John of the Cross still, an intensification of this fire of love. So think of what happens to Therese in 95, etc. So we are probably in this area here. Okay? Do you follow me? Now, if you read an author whom you can guess that more or less she's in this area, but suddenly tells you what am I about to read, you are puzzled. And this is what happened. Therese describes, so I'm now about to read Therese. You can find the text. It's in manuscript C. In this edition, it's page 211. In the manuscripts themselves, it's page 5 verses, no, recto verso. It's 5v, a bit before 5v, in case you are wanting to check in your book. a bit before, a paragraph before. Therese is talking about the way she was able to participate into all the acts of the community of the Holy Week. And they are very tiring acts. You have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours. You don't eat a lot, you eat very little. So it's really an exhausting week normally. And she's talking about this, and then we will move on to the trial. So it was with great fervor that I assisted at Prime and the chapter of pardons. Prime is the first prayer. The monks and nuns who are cloistered or separated, like Benedictines, etc. You have 3 small hours: Prime, which is Terce, Sext, and Non. So the Prime is. And then the chapter of pardons. It's a celebration they have inside you know, you are in the Holy Week, you ask forgiveness, you tell things, etc. to the priest, etc. I was in a rush to see my turn come in order to be able, I was in rush to see my turn come in order to be able, when asking pardon from you, she's talking to the prioress, she's writing to the prioress, to confide my hope and my happiness to you, dear mother. However, I added that I was not suffering in the least, which was true, and I begged you, mother, to give me nothing special. A bit of explanation is needed here. Therese will die from tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, even though I think they had found a solution, but they couldn't cure tuberculosis at her time. So she went through full power of tuberculosis without anything to combat, to fight back tuberculosis. So she dies from tuberculosis, and she starts to have difficulties in the breathing, etc., way before that moment. We are reading here, she's talking about April 96. So before April 96, yeah, maybe they thought she's weak, they were hesitating, etc. Now she's talking about that, no? April 96. So when she says to give me nothing special means exceptions. If you are tired, if your health is not doing well, then the prioress decides that you are exempted from this and that exercise, no? In fact, I had the consolation of spending Good Friday just as I desired. Good Friday, very tiring day. She was full on, capable of following all the exercises, the devotions, etc. Never did Carmel's austerities appear so delightful to me. The hope of going to heaven soon transported me with joy. She felt that she will die. She sensed that her life won't be long, but we will see. When the evening of that blessed day arrived, I had to go to my rest. But just as on the preceding night, good Jesus gave me the same sign that my entrance into eternal life was not far off. She threw blood. She had to go the following day in the morning, during night. She had to go close to the window because they don't have electricity at the time. So to see, and it was blood. So of course the reaction is happiness for her because this means she will go and see God. While for us it's bad news, for her it's good news. So you see, we are, I don't know who is the crazy in the lot. Now listen, please, with great attention, because this is the passage that will puzzle theologians, masters of spiritual life till now. At this time, I was enjoying such a living faith. Enjoying a living faith, which means we are in this period here, after 95. She speaks about the floods of the love of God. So the experience, not only what is happening deep in her, but what is happening as well in the lower part is perceived. Let me draw quickly something for you. Here, this is the human being. Yes, this is the human being, don't worry. It is truly the human being. So, let me draw. Here, this is God and our spirit, her spirit, more precisely. She's already united, so she's here. This is the soul. This is the body and the senses. Here you have the emotions. All this is purified. She's here with her spirit united with God. But there is a little veil here, usually, between that state of union and the conscious part, because soul means mind, will, and all other faculties. The body, you have the senses, and the rest, okay? So, this is the conscious part, all what is below that veil. And this is a supra-conscious part, which is what is happening, this union between her spirit and God, the deepest part of her being and God. So this is her state. Of course, this is me talking, not her. Okay? So this is her state when she's talking, what she's describing. She says, at this time I was enjoying such a living faith, which means what? Which means what is happening here between God and the Spirit has sometimes like little rays that go through, they are refracted, they don't stay the same. They're not the uncreated being of God, they are created graces, but that fill here the mind, the soul, sometimes the emotions, etc. Okay? So this is to experience faith. It's not faith, it's the experience of faith, the enjoying. As she says, enjoying such a living faith, such a clear faith, that the thought of heaven made up all my happiness. The proof, when she discovered that she's about to die, she was delighted. And I was unable, this is very important here, I was unable to believe there were really impious people who had no faith. She's born in a very fervent family. She hears there are people who don't have faith, but her experience and growth throughout the years is not allowing her to imagine that people don't have faith. I believed they were actually speaking against their own inner convictions. Because she heard people saying that God doesn't exist, atheists, etc. Atheism in France is very well present at that time, no? Her own inner convictions were when they denied the existence of heaven. That beautiful heaven where God himself wanted to be their eternal reward. So she says that she didn't believe when they said that they didn't believe in heaven. She thought they were just playing silly, no? Saying something against what in fact they have. They know that God is there, but they're just playing silly, saying, oh no, God doesn't exist. Okay? This is what she thought. During those very joyful days of Easter season, so we finished the Holy Week is finished, now we are in Easter, like for us right now. Jesus made me feel, which means, in other words, gave me the experience of something. Made me feel that there were really souls who have no faith and who, through the abuse of grace, one explanation here is given, they lost this precious treasure. Precious treasure is faith. Faith is a treasure, is a gift of God, no? So you abuse graces, which means you do not follow and listen to the graces that God is giving you, and you misbehave, you end up by losing that faith. So they lost this precious treasure, the source of the only real and pure joys. He, being Jesus, allowed my soul to be invaded by the thickest darkness. My soul, here, to be invaded by the thickest darkness. I wish I had a color like they play today, no? So I would color this area entirely here with a different color. So her soul is invaded by darkness. And that the thought of heaven, up until then, so sweet, so enjoyable, to me, be no longer anything but the cause of struggle and torment. So, this means, translated into my language, the veil here is becoming opaque, not allowing anything to cross. By the way, it's very similar to what happens to the Lord in his passion. Just a little parenthesis. So these red arrows here, you would remove them with these new machines we have. Click, you click like this, all the red goes, and you put this all in dark, and you stop. All the light is here, it's kept away, and nothing is filtering here. Okay, got the point? Got the point? So, I repeat again, he permitted my soul to be invaded by the thickest darkness, and that the thought of heaven, up until then so sweet to me, be no longer anything but the cause of struggle and torment. So she is now put into a combat situation, a fighting situation, where she is invaded by darkness, and now she has to fight back and say no. This is why many paragraphs after she will say, this year I made more acts of faith than all of my life, previous life, all of my life. I made, in this period, from that trial onward, I made more acts of faith than before. Why? Because the act of faith is to say what? No, there is heaven. While in fact, the darkness and the absence of light coming from above that are spreading in her are saying the opposite. You see what I'm trying to say? Panic. You see what I'm trying to say? So the battle now is what? Is whatever is pushing her in a direction, she has to push back in the other direction. Okay? Now, a little allusion of the context of Saint Therese. Of course, you need to read the entire thing. I can't. I would need hours and hours to be able to do that. Now, of the context of Saint Therese, when she talks about people who are saying that there is no faith, etc., remember that the context of Saint Therese is still a growing secularism, a growing atheism. Freemasonry in France is not like Freemasonry in the UK. Freemasonry in France is simply against the church, literally and directly frontal against the church, hence the revolution. I won't enter into these details. She knew and heard of conversions from an alleged conversion from a Freemason called Léo Taxil, who published a book saying that he was a Freemason and that he converted. It ends up, she discovers it after, that all that was a fake, all these things were a lie, and she is hit by that. Remember as well another important element in her life. The only Carmelite priest she heard of, because she never met any, is Father Hyacinthe Loison, or Loison, depending on how you pronounce it. I think it's rather Loison. This Carmelite, the only one she heard of, had left the Carmelite order, religious life, wanted to create his own church, married, etc. So imagine, and realize that Therese, as a Carmelite, she knows that she's called to pray for priests. This is a very, very, very important element in the life of the Carmelite nuns. And this is a direction and a clear orientation given by Saint Therese of Avila. She says, if God gathered you here, it's to pray for the priests. This is the first and most essential mission of the Carmelite nuns. Therese knew that perfectly. She offered her last communion for Father Hyacinthe Loison. So it showed you that, and be aware, the Carmelite nuns are not isolated from the world. I don't know how. Don't ask me, I never knew. I served them for many years in different countries, but I don't know how. They know things before even the media. Yeah, they tell you things. It's like not like from above. No, it's just information. They are very well informed. I don't know how. So don't ever think that the Carmelite nuns are really not really with it. No, they are more with it than you. More with it than you. Trust me. I said from experience. You and me, of course. When I say you, I'm with you. No. So. The news reached the Carmelites. The news of this alleged ex-Mason, converted Mason, repentant Mason, of Father Loison, and many other things, reach the Carmel very easily. But the Carmelite life is a very simple, basic life, and you are inside of an enclosure. So anything that is little becomes very big in the mind and heart of these women, no? A woman is a woman. A nun is twice a woman, and a Carmelite cloistered nun is thrice a woman. So be careful, huh? It's multiplied by 3. Whatever a woman has is multiplied by 3 with these women. So is to show you that they are not. They're more with it than us. No, they're aware of everything. You see, so they're not superficial, or they're not like isolated from the world. Okay. Now, I can't read the rest. I have to get you to the point of where we are going today. I wish I had more time, but maybe another time we can meet. There is no difficulty for that, because it's my thesis, so it doesn't require a huge effort from me to prepare that. Now, theology, in front of that problem. How do you explain? Put yourself in the place of Father Marie-Eugène, Father Louis, and many others that, I would like to mention one important one, Father Garrigou Lagrange, not the Lagrange who founded the school of the biblical school in Jerusalem, another one. Who was philosopher, theologian, and spiritual theologian, a very humble man. Garrigou Lagrange, who was the dean of the University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. They are called the Angelicum, where I'm doing my PhD, by the way. So, for all these and many others that I'm not mentioning, I'm trying to understand where is she exactly? What is happening? Because if you have a trial, we never heard of having a trial after union. We thought that having union means you're, as she says, enjoying faith. You have the experience, so which means the echo of what is happening here is reaching the rest of your being. This is how it is described by John of the Cross, Therese of Avila, etc. Of course, it doesn't mean that a person will not have any struggle or difficulty, but you are still enjoying your faith and that union that you are having. And the union is increasing, and you are expected to die, like fall in the arms of God when you die. So how can you explain that a person, you think, and let me put it as a hypothesis initially, that she is probably in this area here, then she suddenly has something that doesn't correspond at all with union. Because how could you experience this darkness if you are united to God? Unless you have this explanation. This is me, this is not her. So, this trial of faith of Saint Therese that the world starts to hear about in 1898, when the book comes out. There are nuns even in the monastery who never heard of it, because she didn't say it to everybody. You will read it. She says, I fear that I might have blasphemed by saying too much about this trial. Because she says, there is no heaven. For me, what I see, not what I want or not what I believe, but what I feel, is a total absence of heaven. And she says it's a wall that reaches heaven between me and anything. So, you understand what I'm trying to say? It is a very, very, very dark experience. Please read it. It would take me too much time to finish reading it, just reading the description. And she feels even almost sorry that she went into it, but that's the truth. So there are even nuns with her that discovered that she had that trial. They didn't know. They thought she had just tuberculosis and died out of tuberculosis, and that her difficulties and trials are coming just from her health. This is her source of her suffering. They never guessed that there is another source of suffering in her that goes deeper and invisible, and it's carrying the darkness and sitting, as she says, in the table of the sinners and eating with them, like being with the sinners and praying and saying, God have mercy on us. You see? So from a theological point of view, from a theological stand, you have a difficulty with the books we have, with the information we have a difficulty to explain that after union you can still suffer. You can still have that type of trial. You can still have that darkness. So instinctively what happened? I'm talking now history of the 20th century theology. What happened is that instinctively, when you talk about darkness, you go to any book that talks about darkness. And the main book that talks about darkness in the church is St. John of the Cross book called Dark Night of the Spirit. Dark Night of the Sense and Dark Night of the Spirit. Because he talks about things that are similar. That the soul here, when the soul is purified, while the soul is purified, the soul has the impression that she, the soul, is rejected by God. So people said, got it, Eureka. They feel rejected here. Therese said that there is no hope for her, there is no heaven for her. So Therese was where? Was here. Do you understand? You understand? Which bit you don't get?
Just what you said, why does she feel rejected?
Because she says she doesn't feel the presence of heaven. Heaven disappeared completely for her. That's the object of her suffering. That she has the impression that heaven disappeared completely. While St. John of the Cross says something that looks alike and says that during the deep purification, the soul has the impression to be rejected by God. So God is abandoned the person completely. Here, this is the impression. It was all impression. So they say, well, this is fact. If you open the first publication and the following ones, I checked the first one, I checked the one of 1912, the title, one of the subtitles given in chapter 9, if I'm not wrong, it's chapter 9, not in this book, in the Histoire d'une âme, the French one, the titles given to the trial is the same title of St. John of the Cross book, which shows the difficulty to classify and increases a little bit the confusion. So the theologians now have to resolve that puzzle. Is she here or is she somewhere there but not in our books? We have to find a solution. So this is the pioneering work of Father Louis. Of course, he is leaning a lot on intuitions coming from Father Marie-Eugène, but they are not developed in the same way he will develop them afterward. So I would like now to focus on Father Louis Guillet, who is the main author I'm studying for my thesis. He's born in 1902. He entered the Carmelite life in 1934. He died in 1992, so 90 years old. He was initially, for a long time, disciple of Father Marie-Eugène, and then, of course, he shared the responsibilities of the province. He has been a provincial at least for 19 years, sharing it on and off with Father Marie-Eugène and maybe one or two others. So he had he's an important figure in the southern province of the Carmelites in France. But that's not our story. Our story is, what did he do? Father Louis, from very early, and he writes it in one of his books, in the presence of Father Marie-Eugène, because Father Marie-Eugène was the prior of the convent where Father Louis was having his novitiate. And Father Louis entered as a priest already. He was a priest and religious in another congregation, and then he switched and entered to the Carmelite life. So Father Louis felt that there is a difficulty to understand Therese, there is a risk to misunderstand Therese. And remember that it was more rosy Therese was presented more in a rosy way, you know, she's the little flower, the little way, the little this, the little that. So people maybe remained with a nice, gentle Therese and almost nothing to do with this toughness and mystery. Father Louis, I would say in one word, spent his entire life trying to understand Therese, and more specifically trying to understand her trial of faith. The result, and I'm going very fast now, the result of his work is an expansion of the categorization of the journey of spiritual life. So instead of having these 3 sections, he will add another section after. So he will show it this way. We die here. We have a period that corresponds to Therese's trial, a participation to the passion of the Lord, which is of course a union as well, but it's inside. You have union as we know it here, and then of course illumination and purification. So he's not challenging none of the previous parts. He's just saying within the state of union, a person can, and he probably thought as well, he thinks as well that it's normal, it's a normal development, will experience this participation into the passion of the Lord. So in his very small synthesis, compared to Father Marie-Jean's work is very small, this little volume, that encompasses all the journey. Sadly, it's in French only. If you want to translate, you can. You have a completely new 4th part. This never existed in the history of the Church till today. Nobody dared to add a completely new section after union within the state of union. And that's the specific object of my PhD. To show the contribution of Father Louis Guillet in the after union with God, what happens, specifically Therese. So this, as I said, doesn't exist yet. We are not yet aware theologically that we could have a new classification of having a participation into the passion of the Lord. He has a small masterpiece. I'm showing just 2 of his books, and they are the main books, by the way. You're not missing a lot if you don't know about the others. This book is called Gethsemane, Saint Therese, or the Crucified Love. This book is focusing only on the trial of Therese, the trial of faith. But this book is, in my eyes, humbly but firmly, a genius book. Why? Because this book will explain how you could, in the same time, be united with God and in the same time have that trial, which is simply drawn here, which is how this, instead of being a gentle veil, becomes a thick, opaque separation, wall. Therese talks about a wall. How the reality of union could be still there, but in the same time we have the trial, the suffering of the body because of tuberculosis, and the suffering of the soul invaded by this darkness and trying constantly to fight back. Just give me, for these last 3 minutes, give me just the opportunity to give you the structure of the book, because the structure is very, very interesting. This book is divided in 2 parts. One is on Jesus, and one is on Therese. Why? Therese herself gave him the hint. Gave him the hint, not directly because he never knew her, but in her writings. At a certain point, Therese says the following, when she is in the bed illness, no? She's ill in the bed and then she will die a few weeks after. She says the following. She says, I read in the Imitation of Christ, and it's a footnote, so you don't find it in the Imitation, it's a footnote to the edition, the translation she had. She reads the following. Jesus, during his passion, shared fully the delights of the Trinity, and in the same time had the most horrendous suffering and darkness. And she adds, through my experience, I know something about that. So this gave the intuition to Father Louis Guillet to do what? To study the passion of Jesus according to proper theology. And I insist, proper theology, which you don't find very easily today. The passion of Jesus divided in two sections. One is union, and it's according to Thomas Aquinas, by the way. I did study it as well. It's a genius thing, Thomas Aquinas. So Thomas Aquinas, and therefore the Bible, and Father Louis, are showing that Jesus was God, or is God if you prefer, because there's no change, is God. And in the same time, so in his spirit, he shares the delights of the Trinity, so he has what we call the beatific vision. And in the same time, in his soul, this is his spirit, in his soul and body, he is enduring the most horrendous passion, darkness, suffering, etc. This is presented by Thomas Aquinas. This is represented by many other books, and amongst them, this first part of this book of Father Louis, showing how Jesus is in the same time, in the deepest part of himself, like in the light, in the Trinity, his spirit, like it is described here if you want, but of course Jesus, not us. So his spirit is united to his own divinity. Of course, not exactly that drawing, because this is a human being, but stronger, because Jesus is God. He's the second person of the Trinity. So this part of Jesus, this is explained by Thomas Aquinas. This part of Jesus is totally seeing God. But paradoxically, after that, here, this is thick completely, opaque. It doesn't allow any light to go through. This is why he says, my soul is sad or sorrowful till death. He feels his soul is invaded by darkness during his passion, and of course he's suffering it through his body, etc., etc., etc. So, through the contemplation of Jesus, we have, as understood by good theology, Thomas Aquinas, we have a deeper understanding of his passion, which keeps the balance of both aspects. If you lose one of both, there is something that is falling apart in our understanding of Jesus, of his passion, of his salvation. Now, the second part of the book with Father Louis is as well divided in two parts. You have first a series of chapters on the suffering of Therese, like the passion here, passion of the soul and the body. So we have the suffering of Therese and a series of chapters that are documenting. Everything is documented. He's constantly quoting Therese in her passion. Then we have the second part is all the union of Therese with Jesus. How he could guess, of course, we never have an absolute certainty that a person is united with God. We always deduce from the way the person lives, the way the person, what the person says, etc., how the person. So he finds, as a real master of spiritual life, he finds the different elements that confirm in his eyes, as a master in spiritual life, that Therese is united with Jesus, with God, which means she is not in the previous stage here. She is here. By this second part, he shows that she is united, but in the same time, she is undergoing that suffering. This is, for me, this is master, being a great master to do that. Till today, and I'm concluding, till today, of course, this way is paved a little bit by Father Garrigou-Lagrange and way more by Father Marie-Eugène, because Father Marie-Eugène believed deeply that there is a relationship between the act of offering to the love of God, to the merciful love of God, and the passion she undergoes and her suffering. Father Marie-Eugène saw immediately the connection, and he underlines it. But it's not an easy thing to see. Why would you connect this with that? But he saw it, and he states it very early. So Father Louis is leaning on people before him that started to open the way. I won't enter in more details because it would take me, well, you will read one day maybe the thesis, I don't know. But the good thing is that he literally restructure, adding an entire section. This can help us understand what? Have you ever heard of the book that came out on Mother Therese of Calcutta called Come Be My Light, describing 50 years of incapacity, impossibility to have any experience of Jesus? Have you come across of that book? Maybe, you can read it. Now, if you have that knowledge coming from theology is important. If it's done properly, it is very important because it serves us. It's a person who is serving you all the time. So, if you read that book, you will see Mother Teresa from the moment more or less where she starts her new congregation. Remember, she has a long life before. And she's already united with God if you read well, and she received plenty of graces. So she went through all that, but then God asked her to found her new community, and for 50 years, literally 50 years, complete absence of Jesus in her life. Could you believe that? The Mother Teresa that you saw, that maybe you met, lived for 50 years, so you met her, she was in that state. You couldn't guess it, of course. We came to know it, from that book, which is, by the way, letters to her spiritual director. We are not supposed to peer inside, but anyway, that's a little parenthesis. So, you see what I'm trying to say? You see how the progress made by, especially Father Louis Guillet, by explaining with this genius book and the the fourth part here in this book, allows us today to understand something that many saints went through. If you read the life of the Curé of Ars, who is patron of all priests, you will find that the last 2 years of his life, he's in the same state. Complete dereliction. He doesn't have anything to lean on. A great saint. You understand? So it's very important for theology to be able to give a proper account to the reality of what God's work, and not just lean on a structure that is, at least in this area, very insufficient. Yes?
Did these saints who did Saint Therese break through before death and have union again before death, or was it darkness and then death? Or was there a little glimmer just before she died?
Let me reword the question. Did these saints, or some of these saints, have a breakthrough, having union back? I'm just repeating the question. I do not agree with the formulation, but I'm just repeating. No, don't worry. I'm just explaining that I do not agree with the part I'm saying. So did Therese have back again union before Therese or others have, or it lasted till the end? Now, just to clarify the bit that I'm not agreeing with, when you say they get back union, you don't mean that. You mean the experience of union. Because when we say experience, we mean all what is below that veil, which is consciousness, perception. You know, if you suffer, this is conscious. But if you receive communion, you receive Jesus, this is above consciousness. It's real, but it's above. You might feel something and you might not feel something. How many times did you receive communion and hardly felt anything? But it means what? That you are not fervent? No. It means that it's not always necessary to have these red arrows coming down, you see? So what I'm just rewording what you said. Did this veil become thin again and the darkness go away before she died? Well, till the end, no, but the last moment, but really this is last, it's just 1 or 2 minutes during the time of a creed, when you recite the creed. She had an ecstasy, a beautiful ecstasy, and if you look at one of the pictures, we have I think 2 pictures of her dead. One of them, she's of such beauty, incredible beauty, the ovale face she has, dead. But this is God wanted to show us now. So it's only in the end, but really the end, like till the last moment, no, she suffered a lot, and even last day she suffered even more than usual. So now, but technically, nothing would stop you from, as you said, come back to the normal perception of things. It's God, because of course I would need hours and hours to explain all the trial, to explain the words, etc. But it's God who does that, who allows that. It's not something that you would ask for, and never ask for this, please. This is very dangerous spiritually. Don't ask for such a trial. It's God who allows. She said, God allowed me to have this experience, and God gave me this trial only when I was able to bear it. He would have given it to me before, I would have collapsed. I'm quoting her. This is right after the 2 pages after the passage I was reading. So technically it is possible, but in the case of Therese, no.
Does she understand what she's going through?
This is the second good question that we usually need to think about, which is she aware that she is united but sent by God to help her brothers and sisters? In the very case of Therese, yes, but in the case of other saints, not necessarily. So that awareness that you are okay is not always given, which means what? That a person who reaches union, you don't necessarily know it. You know that you're close to God, but you don't have a ceremony like a liturgy. Oh, now you are married, hallelujah, and we celebrate. No, you don't have a clear perception. The clear perception is by the end of purification, yes, you have a change, you sense it, and she mentions it. But after that, there is such an abundance of graces that it's like adding and adding and adding. So marriage itself is just one extra. Of course, it is powerful, but it's not necessarily perceived as it is in the case of Therese of Avila, how she describes it. It's not a liturgical ceremony, you have a ring, you have this, you have that. No. There are people who are united with God, like, I mean this type of union, and who are not aware of it. They are with God, they are serving God, they are loving God, but they are not aware of it. You see what I'm trying to say? Okay? So, there are saints like Saint Gemma Galgani, for instance. I don't know if you heard of her. She's an Italian saint. She is undergoing a similar trial. So it's not a purification. It's a trial. Well, according to him and to me, you can go and find others who will say to you, no, it's a purification, or it's a little bit of purification. No, they will say, no. This is the general admitted option today, which is, yeah, it's a participation in the passion, but there is a little bit of purification as well. I mean, it's like, Purification is here, so how can you talk about purification here? It's like, do you understand the difference between this and this? Anyway, that's mystery for me. So, what I'm trying to say is that, and I quote her, but you can distort sometimes or just read in a different way. In the case of Gemma Galgani, she's not aware that she's fine. She thinks that she is really sinning. I'm sure Mother Teresa wasn't always 100% aware that she was united with Christ. I mean, in a state that it's fine, you know? So, but I don't want to go further because I haven't studied in depth her trial. But just to answer your question, there are saints who are aware and saints who are not aware that they are. Therese says, if you want a soul that loves you to contribute into purifying the sinners, I'm happy. So, sorry, it's stated very clearly. If you want a soul who loves you, she's talking about herself. If you want a soul who loves you to contribute into the purification of the sinners, I'm happy to go for it as long as you want. So she has awareness. And if you read many other things, she has this awareness. I discussed it even with certain theologians, and it's clear. But Gemma, no. Gemma Galgani is not aware. She thinks that she is a sinner. Because the darkness are so strong, you feel almost the act of the darkness, the different acts of darkness, which is here, for instance, the atheist act, which is to say, no, heaven is not there, but there's no perception. So that you have the impression that you are producing this act, but in fact you are not producing that act. You see what I'm trying to say? It's like playing this. So there is a force pushing you in a direction, and you are fighting back in the other direction. So, and all this is happening in you. So you might fall into the believing that in fact you are sometimes agreeing or wanting this, but in fact no. Yes?
When you speak of that she still makes this sort of blind act of faith,
Yeah.
You still need some sort of light, to be able to make that faith. It can't be completely darkness, otherwise, you need your mind and your will to make that act of faith. You're using your powers of your soul to make that act of faith in the first place. Otherwise, you wouldn't even do that.
It's
something there that still is.
The question here is the following. Yes and no. It's not an easy thing. Yes and no. The question. Let me reword the question. The question is, it's not possible to be in total darkness. You might probably have already something in order to lean on and do the act of faith. It is a very complex question, but still I would rather go on the side of no, the absence. She seems to say that it's like she is lying to herself or lying to God, because she has the complete other perception.
And yet she chooses to do it.
Yeah, but she says no. She says, because she says as well, I'm going in a little bit in your direction, even further. She says, you might, she's talking to her mother, the mother prioress, she says, you might think that I'm exaggerating. If you read all my poems, you will think that I'm lying, that I am swimming in the experience of God, or diving in the experience of God, while no, it's not the case. When I sing, which is a poem for her, is like singing her love to God. When I sing what I want to believe. Do you see the expression here, the word, what I want to believe? It shows you the total darkness. I want to believe, it means I don't have any perception. But you're right in saying you have your mind. But what does the mind do here? She had, with the advice of one priest, she wrote the creed, because the creed mentions eternal life in the end. She wrote the creed with her blood and kept the text in the little book of the Gospels that she was wearing in her inside pocket, in her pocket, as a nun. No, you have your brown clothes. No, so it shows you the extremity of what I would say. we are entering in a world that we need to experience it first in order to talk. I don't think at least for myself, even though I'm diving in it all the time, but it's certainly not comparable to what she went through.
What she's talking about is the difference between flesh and spirit. Sometimes a nation retreat, they teach you is to get the gift of desire. So to have the desire, to ask for desire, is moving from the desire of the flesh to the desire of the spirit. So it's like the difference of flesh. Our desire in flesh just dies away, but not the spirit.
Yes, but in this case we are way ahead of that stage. We are here in the presence of a person who is already united with Jesus.
I'm talking about she's going back to the very beginning.
I know, but this stage is the stage of a person who is still growing, while we are trying to understand. This stage you kindly described is in this area. We are just moving from here to there. We're not even here yet. While we are talking here about something, a person who went through all that, who had the experience of God, and then suddenly everything disappears. So you have to believe that this is an action of God, where out of love, she, as Jesus was, is united with the sinners, the darkness of the sinners. She is very well aware that it's very difficult to describe, and she says it. I will stop here because
This was in order for her to then carry them with her, no?
Yes, of course. All this is as she states it, and I'm quoting her, to sit down at the table of the sinners and contribute into their purification and them coming back to God. I'm rather prefer to quote her than to word it myself. So we would need time to try to understand the mechanism of her fighting back, what is she feeling, etc. And I'm still think that we are very far, we will in a way or another still be very far from that, because I think we should better talk about other things before, where probably we might be in order to know how even these experiences are extremely tough beyond. So imagine we're talking about something multiplied. So just allow me to conclude, because it's already 20 past 12. So I know you will hang me, but you shouldn't, but you might want. So just to conclude, again, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you saw few points that I want to remind you. First, the reality of holiness and the holiness of Saint Therese specifically. We are in front of not a normal saint. We lost the perception of who is Therese today. And we started to lose it just right after the Second World War. Now she's diluted between other saints. She's equivalent to other saints. That's not the case at all. Therese is a great prophet, sent by God himself to open our eyes on various elements of spiritual life. To put her back into the level of others, this is very dangerous, because we are missing something. Therese has been declared Doctor of the Church in 1997 by Pope John Paul II, which is a very important act coming from the Church. And one of the main persons who worked to give us the final version, the critical version of all her works in French, who is Monseigneur Guillet, who died unfortunately after having finished all his work, said in two different moments. In '92, when the small book, the Totum, the French Totum, came out with all her works, and for her the critical version as well, which is 9 volumes, it's big like that, with all footnotes, letters going both ways, etc. Repeated it again for her doctorate, like when the Church declared her a doctor. He said, everything starts now. It is just starting. 100 years after, I still think, like Father Louis, that we are starting to understand Therese. We are just starting. We haven't really. So all the books that have been published, all the things that we have already available are good, certainly, but it's important for each one of us to understand that Therese is a special messenger sent by God to each one of us. She's really an exceptional saint, and she changes a lot of the notions we have of spiritual life. Your life before Therese and after knowing Therese is certainly different. It's impossible to have the same thing. Otherwise, you missed something. There are people who are shocked and are struggling in reading Therese because she looks like very pink. Everything is pink, is rosy, is lovely, is flowery, etc. Little things, etc. So you are certainly misled by this in thinking that, yeah, she's a nice little saint and you cuddle her, etc. You know, the little thing. While in fact you are in front of a giant. You are in front of a giant. After, I don't know, I started to discover her in January 85. Look, we are 2018 and I'm still discovering new things in her, and I don't consider that I know anything about her. Okay? So, I hope that you will keep in mind that proper theology and good theology is very needed in the church, because theology, well understood, is at the service of spiritual life. It helps us to reach holiness and not just to be blind. So please make a prayer from time to time for the theologians in the church. They are the people who are the most forgotten because of some maybe things they did. Maybe they deserve it, but others as well are working. It's very important to have this help. Of course, theology without spiritual life would be of no use as well. So please have a prayer for theologians, and please, I ask you humbly to pray for me so I could finish that work, because it's very difficult. So let us just conclude by saying a short prayer, and Our Father with all our heart, knowing that Therese is with us, is among us. Therese wants to befriend us. This is one of the unique aspects of Therese. Therese is not just a book you read. Therese is a sister whom you meet, you discover every day more, and who walks with you every day. Therese is a friend, is a real friend. She said, I will spend my heaven on earth. And she meant it, and she did it. She continues to do it. So please don't be afraid of having Therese as a real person walking with you every day. That's part of the deal. It's not like hocus pocus, strange things. That's the reality that thousands and hundreds of thousands of people experience in their life. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of Therese. Thank you, Lord, for Blessed Marie Eugène. Thank you, Lord, for Father Louis, for all their life, their sacrifice, their efforts, huge efforts, all of them. And give us the grace, O Lord, to receive your graces. Give us the grace, prepare us to be at the level of these graces. Make us believe in the message of Therese, the message you sent us through Therese, and so we could receive the abundance of the flows of your love and just be all the time with you and grow in your love. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you again for all your support. Really, really. I ask Our Lady to thank you, so I can't thank you. I don't know how to thank you. So I ask Our Lady to thank you and shower you, and thank you for all the people who are watching us as well, who weren't able to be here today. Thank you very much.